Hey, first and foremost, man, I'd like to thank you for inviting me out to your home. And I just had one question, and maybe depending upon some of your answers, maybe a few more. But the main thing is, where do you stand as far as the cause of some of the violence and homicides and just crime in general here in Kansas City, Missouri?
I think it stems from when kids grow up without a sense of consequence. When they do things as a youth and there's no consequence for their actions, they grow up with a sense of feeling invincible. And because of that, as they go off into their adulthood, if they've been spoiled as a child, they get what they want when they want it. When they get older, they feel like they can take what they want when they want it. And if there's never been any discipline, if there's never been any consequence for their actions when they were small, then they feel like there won't be any consequence for their action as they get older. Going back to the violence, I think it's just, and it's going to sound crazy, but I think it's truly a cry for attention. I work in a psychiatric field, and when you talk to some of these clients one-on-one, some of the most surprising things that they tell you is when they were coming up, they either didn't get the love that they craved or they didn't get the discipline that they needed. I had a grown man, 44 years old, crying, saying he wished his mother would have told him no, saying he wished one time when she caught him smoking weed, she would have said something.
Well, how do you get that through to kids today? You know, a lot of times I find that you have single mothers,
right,
and they try to overcompensate for the lack of having a father in the home by buying. You know what I mean? They don't have time really to spend and give quality time to their kids because they're so busy trying to maintain the roof over their head.
Right.
That's due to no fault of their own.
Right.
But, I mean, what do you say to kids like that? I mean...
Well, see, first, before I go into that, I better make this statement first. I think women are wonderful. I mean, I understand, and a lot of people are going to get upset about this statement, but there are only two people in the world, and that's women and their children. So, first and foremost, I think women are great. But one thing, a woman can say, I'm going to be the mother and the father. No, you're going to be the mother because the Bible says iron sharpens iron. A woman has no idea what it's like to raise a man because they have no idea what it's like to be a man. So if you take that logic, then nowadays I really wouldn't know what to say to these kids. I mean, because they're already, even at 4 and 5 and 6 years old, they're walking around, they're hard, they got their pants sagging, they got their bandanas, they telling you what they ain't gonna do. And this is at the time when we were that age, we watching cartoons, trading cards, and, you know, talking about what we gonna do this Saturday evening. Now you got kids, you know, busting raps with all the cuss words in it and all of that, and and it's like the parents just say, well, it's just a phase. I mean, the fathers, they hear their kids saying that stuff and they proud. You know, like, my boy's hard. That's right, he ain't gonna be no punk. Being hard and being violent is not what keeps you from being a punk. Teach a man how to be a man. In a woman's case, go to men, talk to him. You don't have to have a man to talk to a man. You know, ask him, you know, my son is doing this right now. What would you suggest? You'd be surprised at how willing a man would be to say, hey, I remember going through that stage. Now, what I wish I would have did, you can start a whole dialogue like that, and pretty soon you have a working unit. It doesn't have to be a hookup. It doesn't have to be a couple. You don't have to have a man in order to get help from a man.
Now, I feel where you're coming from, and not only do I feel it, but I agree with you. But with so many people coming up the way that they are, how difficult is it to really find a man that wants to be involved not only with children but with somebody else's children?
Well, see, that's the thing. I'm not telling these women to go up and say, hey, help me raise my kid. All you have to do is go up and say, you know what? I mean, if a woman came up to me and said, you know, my son's 12 years old, he's spending a lot of time in the bathroom. We know what that means. As a man, I spent a lot of time in the bathroom when I was 12. I'm sure you did too. We know what that means, so we know what they're going through. Like I said, if you give a man an opportunity to just share what he knows, you'd be surprised at what you start. I'm not saying you have to go out and say, please help me raise my children, but there's nothing wrong with saying, my boy is doing this, or my girl is doing that for men. I know some men that are raising daughters. A man doesn't know how to be a woman.
That's right.
A man cannot, iron sharpens iron. The Bible says it itself. And so, talk. Start a dialogue. I think that would be the biggest help right now for, you know, helping children today.
Who's affected the most by what's going on today? I mean, right now the teenage group is the second leading group who are victims of homicide. The first is anybody from 20 to about 27 years old.
Right.
So how do we cut it off or head it off at the pass, so they say, and when you have some people who are 20 to 27, the people in the 14 to 18-year-old age group is looking up to them. So how do we not let that be a big influence on them?
Right, these young adults. Now, we talk about the ones that have already gone through the trap. They've already had the parents that have leeway. You know, you do your thing, I'm going to do mine. Hey, be independent. So, yeah, that is a problem. And dialogue with them, very hard. We had a 20-something working at the job that I work at. Couldn't tell him anything. He thought he knew everything about everything. Those are probably the hardest people to talk to if you can't get them to open their mind. Once again, it starts with dialogue, but you're going to have to find common ground with those people before you can get an open dialogue, because we've all been 20-something. We all thought once we hit 2021, we knew everything about everything. So at that point, it's up to the older people to start to share their knowledge, not in a condescending way, not in a boy you ain't lived, you ain't seen nothing way, but, you know, like I was telling this young man that I used to work with, he ended up getting fired. But, you know, every chance I got, you know, I'd be like, hey, you know, when I was your age, whatever, you know, and he'd shrug me off, but he started to listen, but just a little too late. But I'm hoping maybe on his next job, if somebody else gets a hold of his ear, he'll settle down a little bit more and start to listen a little bit more.
Hey, man, I really appreciate your time. I know it's a little chilly out here. Thanks for inviting me to your home. Is there any lasting message that you would like? Because we are living in the internet age, which I feel like is a big problem too. But I'm also using it as a vehicle to get a message across. Right. So not only here in Kansas City, but nationally. You have a national audience. Is there anything you'd like to say in part?
Start a conversation. Just start the dialogue. Ask a question and don't be ashamed. Nobody knows it all, but we all know enough to help each other out.
All right, man. I appreciate it. You have a good one.
You do the same, man.
All right.